In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make this ring out of a kit. So with just a piece of scrap wood, which may be purple heart, I'm not sure which kind it is actually. Then you can see there's the ring, and then this white block there is just a sacrificial piece of framing wood. So the first step, go over to the table saw, use my sled to cut off a little slice here that I'll use as the turning blank. Once you have the blank, just put on some CA glue and then put activator on the sacrificial piece. Hold them together for a few seconds, and it doesn't need to wait long at all. They'll be ready to go. From there, just get the pieces locked in place on the chuck, tighten down, and framing lumber is really soft, so you can really crank down on top of it. For the first part, just take the square bit carbide tool and turn it down, get rid of all the jagged edges, make it round. And it can be rough here. We're not looking to finish it off at this point yet. Once it's turned, back out the tailstock, and I put in a Forstner bit in there, a drill chuck here. So the bits I use are they're from a kit. They're not the nicest Forstner bits, so you'll see that they do burn pretty quickly. So there's some smoke coming out, and then they don't have deep channels like professional Forstner bits do, so it's not quite as smooth of a cut, but it works just fine for what we need here. From that standpoint, just the intent was to go slow and make it just a little bit more hollowed out so I could get the ring inside, which I took my time, I thought, and did this a good 4 or 5 times and kept slowly going, and then ended up at the very end, once I thought I was at a right spot, I ended up gouging deeper than I intended, and the piece you see here is not the actual finished piece, but I just left it so that way you could see how the whole process went down. So I'm not really sure where I messed up. I felt like I was taking my time, and then somewhere between here and the next minute or two I just ended up screwing up. So it's kind of a bummer. You can see it slides way in there. There's lots of play, and I thought I'd be able to fix it, but not going to happen. So once you get that, I just take the parting tool and separate the 2 pieces of wood. Ends up popping off really easily, and then some of that sacrificial piece, you can see how jagged it is going to be stuck on the bottom of the piece where my hand is. You couldn't really see it. Now if you get that turned, it's a good idea to go ahead and rough up the ring itself. That way you can put epoxy or CA glue or something in there, and it'll have a little bit more of a rough surface to adhere to. So after that, I went and got rid of all those jagged pieces I was talking about coming off of the piece of framing wood. I did forget to pull the extra cap and the black handle. You can see where I'm struggling here, but that's because that was preventing me from squeezing it. So that's kind of a knucklehead move that I missed, and it ended up being fine. So after I got the epoxy mixed up, I threw a lot of it in there, and not on this round, sorry, this is the one where I messed up. But you can see it was just way too much room. So I ended up having to scrap it. That piece ended up going in the stick pile. But after I got the ring out, I wiped it all off and had it cleaned up. Did all that off camera. So then I went back to the drawing board, did a whole new process, and didn't show you the second go around. But here I put in a lot more epoxy, and the ring, you can see, fits a lot nicer. So once it's in there, just had lots of squeeze out and made sure I got as much of it off as I could. So this 5-minute epoxy, once that had dried over a good 5 minutes or so, put it on the mandrel, and then went back over to the lathe. from here, I started out with the round bit, and this whole process, since it's so skinny and not a whole lot of wood in there to turn, this process might have taken 2 or 3 minutes total. So once I had it shaped up pretty well, I grabbed the square tip bit, or tool, excuse me, and then was able to get rid of some of the squeeze out that I'd missed. And I actually was just turning the lathe by hand, just using it as kind of a scraper at that point. So after all that was done, I went and got 300, 400, or 320, 400, and 600 grit sandpaper. So it doesn't take much sanding at all, and you really don't want to sand too much because there's not a whole lot of material, so you'll end up sanding away too much of it. But off camera, I did use some mineral spirits to get rid of any of the oils and excess sawdust that was kind of sticking around after turning. Once that was finished and the mineral spirits had kind of evaporated away, went over to my go-to finish for this kind of stuff, which is high friction polish. So the first step with that is just to wipe it on, and then once it's on there, then turn on the lathe and use actual friction, and that's how it hence the name, high friction polish. So went through a good 5 or 6 layers of that stuff, and it ends up giving it a pretty good little protected coating on top and makes it have a nice little sheen to it. So after all the work, here's kind of a close-up view, and you do get an idea of what I'm talking about on the kind of squeeze out and epoxy, which I'll be able to clean up. So I was able to get some of it off with my hands, which was nice, and the parts that I couldn't, I just used some 600 grit sandpaper and lightly sanded it flat off camera. It's kind of tricky. I couldn't get the camera to focus on the ring. It just wanted to focus on my knuckles, which doesn't do anybody any good. So here, since you can't see it, we'll just show the same picture from the beginning and give you an idea. So thanks for watching.